Sung Jin-woo is the epitome of starting from the bottom and still managing to disappoint. This kid couldn't hunt a goblin if it tripped over him, but lo and behold, he survives a dungeon, and suddenly he's the overpowered protagonist with cheat codes for days. It's like watching someone stumble into greatness while the rest of us are stuck in traffic. But who knows what lies ahead for our lucky underdog? Maybe his luck will run out, or maybe he'll continue to defy expectations like every other anime protagonist with plot armor. From the bridge of a ship, some soldiers watch and pray that the battle on the island will end soon. Meanwhile, the hunters on the island are in a losing battle against some giant ants, and just when they think all hope is lost, they are saved by 3 S-rank hunters. Byung-gyu, who is the healer, is left alone to help the injured, while the other two, Yoon-ho and Yoon-seok, go ahead to finish off the new wave of ants in the first ever Marvel DC crossover. Yoon-ho does his Bane power-ups without the Tren injection, of course, while Yoon-seok slashes through the ants with his Wolverine claws and a mix of Storm's lightning powers. Elsewhere on the island, a red-haired man sets the ants ablaze with his fire, after which he orders the other hunters to charge forward and attack. Sometime before this, Jin-woo arrives at the site of the gate to join the other hunters in the dungeon raid. As he walks by, Byung-shik, who is speaking with Mr. Kim, he asks if Jin-woo is a powerful S-rank hunter since everyone is happy to see him. Kim tells him that Jin-woo is a weak-ass E-rank hunter, who even got hurt in an E-rank dungeon. I bet he would even get beat up by my 6-year-old sister. He says Jin-woo was so weak, he'd earned the name humanity's weakest hunter. As Jin-woo makes his way into the site, Joo-hee approaches him, asking why he's covered in injuries, so they sit down together, and he explains that he was injured during his last dungeon raid. She tells him to take better care of himself because the protagonist's plot armor hasn't kicked in yet, since it's only episode 1. He then notices their group is about to pass through the gate, so they both get up and go join them. Before the group proceeds into the dungeon, a man addresses them and volunteers to be the captain of the raid, after which he introduces himself as Song Chi-yul. The hunters then pass through the gate, with Jin-woo going through last. Meanwhile, at the Hunter Association headquarters, the president of the association, Go Gun-hee, tells his assistant about his meeting with the government officials. He says they want a stable supply of the goods acquired from the dungeons, since the magic germs and mana crystals obtained from the dungeons could be used to make weapons. However, the government is planning to use them as a new energy source and is researching ways to generate electricity with them. Back in the dungeon, Jin-woo's group defeat the dungeon boss, while he is being healed by Joo-hee after he gets stabbed by a low-level goblin. When she's done, he hears the others talk about the items they gathered, making the E-rank gem he got seem insignificant. However, another member of their group discovers a hidden passage, and most of the members seem to think it's a second dungeon. Chi-yul suggests they return and inform the Hunter Association, but the members insist on going in to check it out, so they vote on it. After the vote, they come to a tie, and Jin-woo's vote is to be the tiebreaker, so he votes that they go in because he is in desperate need of money. Elsewhere, in a hunter testing facility, different hunter associations try to recruit newly awakened hunters. One of the recruiters makes a call to Choi Jong-in, who tells him to recruit only the finest. However, he doesn't think the recruiter can find someone as exceptional as Cha Hai-in. Meanwhile, Hai-in stops some thieves after they steal a woman's purse in the street and makes a hasty retreat when people realize who she is. In the dungeon, Joo-hee scolds the dim-witted Jin-woo for voting in favor of investigating the dungeon, even though he's a walking injury factory. He apologizes, and she tells him that if he wishes to make it up to her, he should take her out to dinner. Jin-woo is surprised and can't hide it from his face, making her think he's trying to refuse, but he assures her that isn't the case. The group eventually stop at a door but are skeptical about going in. However, Kim approaches it, saying they need all the gems they can get. Back in the city, a group of newly awakened hunters sit in a room where they watch a pre-recorded message from the association's president. He tells them that as hunters, they risk their lives every day by going through the gate to fight monsters. He says that the most important thing to remember during dungeon raids is that they have to be careful because things get dangerous quickly. Back in the dungeon, Jin-woo's dumbass group prove that they are the reason President Go warns against stupidly charging into dungeons by going into the never-before-seen dungeon. As they wander into the dungeon, they notice different statues with a bigger one sitting in the middle. One of the members notices a statue holding what seems to be commandments written in stone. While they were reading it, Ju-hee tells her that the big creepy statue was looking at her, but he tells her that she'd spent one too many nights watching Annabelle, and that she's now imagining things. The next moment, the doors shut with a bang, and at this point, the members of the group are beginning to think they are in a haunted house. One of the guys tells them that he's leaving and goes to push the doors open, but before he can achieve that, the statue closest to him moves and chops his head off, adding a splash of color to the otherwise dark and gloomy room. The group can't believe the horror they've just witnessed, and in Jin-woo's fearful state, he looks towards the bigger statue. Just like Chucky, the statue's eyes turn to him but begin to glow, and Jin-woo's pathetic and miserable life as a hunter flashes before his eyes, as he is sure he is about to meet his maker. He then screams for his group members to get down, just as the statue fires a beam of light. The members move, but the blasts hit some of them in the process. Chi-yul tells the remaining members of the group not to make any sudden moves as he makes his way to Jin-woo. He then thanks him for quickly figuring out what the situation was, but Jin-woo tells him that he only called out to them because he felt something was wrong. He soon notices that Chi-yul's left arm has been cut off, but Chi-yul tells him not to worry and asks him to help stop the bleeding. While John-woo bandages his wound, Chi-yul tells him that he intends to ask Ju-hee to heal him, but she is a wreck as she doesn't know how to handle stressful situations. The next moment, one of the group members gets up saying he wasn't going to die in a dungeon. He then attempts to break the Flash's record as the fastest man alive by outrunning the statue's beam, but the statue proves Einstein's theory that nothing is faster than the speed of light and disintegrates his entire body, only leaving his legs as a souvenir for his friends. After seeing this, Chi-yum and Jin-woo conclude that the statue could take them out easily if it wanted to. Jin-woo begins to wonder why the statue hadn't taken the rest of them out, and figures that like every other dungeon, this one has its rules. Suddenly, he remembers the commandments and asks Chi-yul to tell him what the first one was. Chi-yul tells him that the first commandment was to revere God, and Jin-woo says that they had to follow the rules before getting up. Chi-yul tries to stop him, but when he sees the look of determination on his face, he lets him. The moment Jin-woo stands up, the statue notices him, but before it can kill him, Jin-woo bows his head, causing the attack to halt. Jin-woo realizes the only way to save themselves is to bow, so he tells the others to do that. The moment they do this, the statue's expression changes and it smiles like a Cheshire cat, making it look like the nun's twin brother, the priest. After a while, Beom-shik rises to his feet when he realizes that the statue's attacks have stopped. The others stand up too, thinking they can finally go back home, but their hopes are dashed when the statue gets up from its chair. As it begins to approach them, Chi-yul turns to Jin-woo for help, but he tells him he has no idea what to do. However, he suggests doing the second commandment, which was to praise God, but no one seemed to know how. A guy then steps up saying he's been studying different religions, so he gets on his knees and starts praying. Just when they think his prayers are working, the evil statue quashes him under its feet like a bug. This makes the others start running around like headless chickens until Chi-yul suggests they spread out in different directions. As they run, Beom-shik tells himself that he cannot die in the dungeon because he has his pregnant wife and child to return to. He then runs and stands in front of a statue, but by the time Kim tells him to move the statue behind him, slashed him in half. The same thing happens when some other members stand in front of statues holding weapons. Jin-woo, who is running together with Ju-hee, soon realizes that they need to stand in front of the statues holding instruments, so he informs the other. They immediately do this, and the statues begin to play. But when Jin-woo and Ju-hee arrive at a statue, it doesn't play, and he deduces that it's one person per statue. He tells Ju-hee to remain where she is, and he runs towards another statue with the god statue hot on his tail. When it raises its leg to squish him, Jin-woo jumps out of the way and lands before a statue. Unfortunately, it isn't one with an instrument, so it brings its shield down on him, but Jin-woo crawls out from underneath it and manages to make it to the singing statue in time. The god statue returns to its seat, and Ju-hee runs to check up on Jin-woo only to discover that his right leg has been cut off. Ju-hee struggles to heal him even though it's taking a toll on her body, and Kim starts blaming Chi-yul for their misfortune. The others remind him that he was the one who suggested they check out the dungeon in the first place, but Chi-yul accepts the blame as their leader. The next moment, the god statue raises its hand, and an altar rises in the middle of the dungeon. Chi-yul turns to Jin-woo, asking what they are to do next, and he tells them that the last commandment is to prove their faith in God. Kim immediately pulls out his sword and says they would use Chi-yul as a sacrificial lamb. When Chi-yul steps into the circle, a light comes on, confusing them further, so Jin-woo asks 2 of the remaining members of the group to help him to the altar. When they step into the circle, 3 more lights come on, and Chi-yul tells him that they have to figure out a way to get out of the dungeon because if the gate stayed open for more than 7 days, it would lead to a dungeon break. If a dungeon break occurs, the monsters inside would make their way into the world, which is why the hunters went into the dungeons to kill the monsters in the first place. Jin-woo realizes that if they don't defeat this so-called god and close the gate, it will escape into the city and cause real damage, so he calls Kim and Joo-hee and asks them to join them. With the 6 of them in the circle, blue lights come on, and almost immediately, the statue with weapons starts moving towards them. They also notice that the doors have opened, but Jin-woo tells them they have to make eye contact with the statues to stop them from moving. However, the girl helping him stand gets overwhelmed and makes a run for the doors. Luckily, she makes it through, but the doors close a bit and Jin-woo thinks the so-called god is trying to give them false hope. The guy holding also gets tired and runs away, leaving only 4 of them in the middle of the circle. Jin-woo tells them that if they could keep their eyes on the statues until the blue lights go out, they would all be able to leave. Unfortunately, Kim abandons ship, leaving only Jin-woo, Joo-hee, and Chi-yul in the circle. Chi-yul then tells Jin-woo to take Joo-hoo and leave, but when Joo-hee's legs give out, Jin-woo suggests Chi-yul take her and go. They start to protest, but he points out that he has only 1 leg and will not be able to carry her out even if he tries. He then gives her the magic gem he got from killing the goblin and tells her to use it to buy the dinner he promised her. Joo-hee starts protesting but gets knocked out by Chi-yul, after which he takes her out of the dungeon. Alone, Jin-woo tries to gaslight himself into thinking he'll be able to take on the statues, but they give him a royal beating. At some point, his arm gets cut off, and Jin-woo starts to regret his decision to act as a martyr. One of the statues impales him with its spear and picks him up before dropping him on the altar. As he lay there about to be killed by the statues, he wished he could get another chance to live his life, and right before his eyes closed, a screen appeared with an option to restart the quest. The next thing he knows, he finds himself in a hospital bed with all his injuries gone and his limbs restored. Jin-woo is surprised by this. What? And begins to wonder if it was all a dream. But the next moment, the door opens, and the men in black walk in. The blonde man then introduces himself as Woo Jin-chul, the manager of the Hunter Association surveillance team, and the second man introduces himself as Kang Tai-shik. They tell him that he's been unconscious for 3 days, and he asks how Chi-yul and Joo-hee are doing. Jin-chul lets him know that because he lost his arm, Chi-yul will have to retire from being a hunter. While Joo-hee is so traumatized, she's become Arkham's newest outpatient and might also have to retire. He also tells him that after the others made it out of the dungeon, they alerted the White Tiger Guild, but by the time they arrived, the temple was gone, and Jin-woo was the only person they found in the cave. Jin-chul added that, if not for the fact that the survivors' statements all correlated, or that some of the remains of the other members were recovered, no one would have believed the temple was there in the first place. He then asked Jin-woo if he'd experienced a second awakening, which allows an already awakened hunter to surpass their current rank. This has Jin-woo thinking that he had somehow leveled up and was now a badass high rank. After Tai-shik confirms Jin-woo's rank with a manometer, he shows Jin-chul the number, which is 10, and they inform Jin-woo that he's still at the bottom of the food chain. When they leave, Jin-woo lays back on his bed wondering why no one said anything about the screen hovering above his bed. The screen shows him that he has a new message, but when he tries touching it, glitches, and he remembers seeing something similar in the temple. The next moment, his sister Jin-ah comes into the room and begins scolding him for always trying to get himself a free pass to the afterlife. She tells him that the next time he lands himself in the hospital, she'd quit school and find a job. Jin-woo apologizes for making her worry and asks how he can read messages in a game, so she explains it. However, she seems to think he has a loose screw and asks why he's bringing up games all of a sudden. He tells her it's because he has nothing to do, which she accepts and then bids him farewell. After she leaves, Jin-woo unlocks the message and sees that he has a new quest he must complete, or he faces a penalty. When he opens the quest, he sees it's a workout plan, but he ignores it, saying he has no strength to perform such tasks. Outside, Jin-chul informs President Go that they were wrong about the second awakening. However, Go tells him to enter the case into the databank so further investigation can be done, because he feels there is something more to it. Meanwhile, at the Hunters Guild, Jong-in tells Hai-in that she is to act as an instructor during a B-rank raid, which is a test for their recruits. She tries to refuse, but he insists, saying she's the best in the guild, and he trusts in her ability. He also says he is trying to build up their guild's combat abilities, and she is the best candidate for it. Elsewhere, a gate opens in the middle of a road and almost causes an accident. Back at the hospital, Jin-woo was asleep, but the moment the clock struck 12, the room started shaking. He wakes with a start thinking there's an earthquake, but he gets thrown off the bed. When next he opened his eyes, he saw that he was in a desert, and the ugliest-looking centipede he'd ever seen came up behind him. The screen appears again, showing him that he is doing a penalty quest, and all he has to do is survive for the next 4 hours. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? Unfortunately, Jin-woo didn't think that way, not with the huge, creepy crawler trying to turn him into an appetizer. Meanwhile, the nurses go to his room to check on him and find it empty, so they start looking everywhere for him. Back in the desert, Jin-woo runs against the sands of time to avoid getting eaten by the centipede and his other family members. Luckily, the time elapses and he finds himself back in his room, panting like he'd just finished a marathon, which he did, by the way. As he lies on the floor, the screen notifies him that he has completed the penalty quest right before the door opens, and the nurses find him passed out. Days later, Joo-hee gets a call from Kim the deserter, asking if she'd like to join him on a new raid, but she declines. He then tells her that Jin-woo has woken up, which makes her very happy, so she goes to visit him. When she gets to the hospital, she meets 2 nurses in the corridor talking about Jin-woo and his daily exercise routine. She looks out the window just in time to see Jin-woo run past, so she turns around and leaves. After his run, Jin-woo sits on a bench and checks the screen for his rewards since he completed the task. The first one removes all the exhaustion he feels, and the second is ability points, which he adds to his strength. Back in his room, he receives a random loot box containing a key, after which the screen appears and lets him know the key can be used to teleport to an instance dungeon. Later on, he goes to visit his mother, and as he watches her, he remembers how he'd found her unconscious 4 years ago. The doctors had told him she had the eternal death disease, which was caused by exposure to mana. However, they were unable to treat her, so she was put on life support, and has been that way ever since. Later that day, Jin-woo goes to the Hapjeong station entrance and uses the key to open the instance dungeon. When he steps inside, the entrance seals up, and he realizes he is in an alternate dimension after he sees a woman walk out of the station. The screen lets him know that the only way out is by either clearing the dungeon or using a teleportation stone, so he decides to try clearing the dungeon. While exploring the dungeon, he is attacked by goblins, but he manages to fight them off. Before he can bask in the fact that he has gotten stronger, he is attacked by a wolf, but manages to dodge. When the wolf moves to attack again, he notices his legs wobbling like jelly, and wonders if it's because he's afraid. The wolf jumps, but Jin-woo moves in time but gets a small cut on his cheek. The wolf moves in for another attack, and Jin-woo does an award-winning gymnast move before bringing out his inner Saitama and punching the wolf into a wall. The wolf gets back up and charges at him again, so he keeps punching it, but quickly realizes it's useless and runs for his dear life. When he stopped running, he pulled up his inventory and pulled out a sword, which he used to slice the wolf in half. With the wolf dead, the screen shows that he has leveled up, after which his injury healed. However, he notices 2 more wolves approaching him and struggles to pull his sword out of the ground as it has become stuck. When he finally pulls it out, he swings the sword, but one of the wolves pulls a classic Zoro move and catches the blade with its teeth. Jin-woo kicks it, causing it to let go, and in one strike, slices its head off before turning to the second wolf, but it runs away. Jin-woo crumbles to the floor and checks his stats, which shows that he is now a level 2. This makes him realize that the more fights, the more his abilities increase, causing him to grow stronger than before. While checking the bodies for gems, he finds out that he is to get items instead, which makes him wonder if the monsters in the instance dungeon were different from the ones in the gate. After receiving the wolf's fang, he sells it and picks up his sword, wondering if he should leave, but remembers that he'd have to acquire a teleportation stone to be able to do so without facing the boss. Just then, he notices that the runaway wolf is back and it has brought his friends to play, so he charges and manages to defeat each one of them at the expense of his sword. The rewards he receives from killing them include a teleportation stone, But Jinwoo figures that if he decides to chicken out and leave, he'll never become strong enough. Outside, Joo-hee gets a call to assist the hunters who are dealing with a dungeon break. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo battles monster after monster, to the point where the monsters that were stronger than him before were now weaker than him because of how much he leveled up. As he makes his way through the station, he comes upon a staircase, which emits a dark aura. Jinwoo descends the stairs after concluding that it is the only way to clear the dungeon. When he gets to the bottom, he gets thrown to the wall by a fast-moving monster, which breaks his sword in half. The monster then emerges from the water to reveal that it is a high-level blue venom-fanged Kasaka, in other words, a giant-ass anaconda with glowing eyes. Jinwoo quickly assesses his opponent and realizes that its armored scales would be impenetrable with his sword. The snake attacks and Jinwoo manages to deflect using his sword despite its speed. It then does a complete 180 and slaps Jinwoo into the water before going after him and knocking him out of it. When the snake emerges again, its body knocks over an old train, which almost crushes Jinwoo. He then picks up his broken sword and does a battle cry, only to be knocked around by the snake like a lifeless doll. However, Jinwoo refuses to give up and makes one last stand because compared to the false god in the temple, the snake is nothing. When the snake charges at him, he grabs hold of its body and manages to hold on even though it trashes about. Finally, he gets closer to its head, and with the power of determination, more like an adrenaline rush, he clamps down on it. Since he's been developing his strength, the snake's armored scales give way, allowing him to pop some veins and kill it. With the snake dead, Jinwoo catches his breath while he checks his stats and items. One of the items was a dagger made from the snake's fang, and the other was a deadly poison made from its venom. He soon gets notified that he has cleared the dungeon by defeating the boss, so everything returns to normal, and he finds himself back in the train station. After making his way out of the station, he sees the streets are empty and wonders what time it is. He doesn't wonder for long as a soldier comes and tries to get him to leave, but when he notices his broken sword, he leads him towards the ongoing battle. As they walk, the soldier tells Jinwoo that the hunters have taken down all the monsters except one. Jinwoo didn't need to be told it was the boss, as he could sense its presence thanks to his new abilities. When they arrive, Jinwoo sees that the hunters are losing against the golem kaiju because they are all low ranks. He also notices Joo-hee, who seems to be finding it hard to use her healing power because of her trauma. He then assesses the monster to see if it has any weaknesses, which would allow the hunters to overpower it before launching his sword at it. The force of the throw allows the sword to pierce through and break the monster's defenses. Immediately, the hunters take action and manage to destroy the golem. However, one of the hunters recognizes that someone powerful has broken the defense, and not them. When he saw the sword, he asked the soldier closest to him if he had seen who threw it, so he turned to point Jinwoo out, but he'd already disappeared into the night just like Batman. Meanwhile, as Jinwoo makes his way to the hospital, he thinks the reason he was able to break the monster's defense was because it was already weak. Days later, while Jinwoo worked on his summer body, the nurses couldn't help but gossip about how ripped he'd become since he started working out. Later on, when one of them went to inform him about his discharge, she walked in on him cleaning the sweat off his rock-hard abs. She quickly turned away in an attempt to be modest, but it's obvious her thoughts weren't very modest, if you catch my drift. After he puts on his shirt, she tells him why she has come, but instead of leaving when she is done, she begs him to give her his phone number. It seemed his glow-up wasn't something she could resist, but the slow-brained Jinwoo thought she was asking so she could send him test results later on. The next morning, after Jinna leaves for school, Jinwoo checks his stats and allocates the points he has gathered to his different abilities. After that, he receives a call from his landlord reminding him that he's behind on his rent, so he assures him that he'll pay him soon. He decides to look for jobs online in hopes of finding a high-ranking one now that he is stronger. However, he is aware that no one would want to allow an E-rank hunter into high-ranked raids. He then considers getting a rank reappraisal, because that way he can discover if he has truly reawakened. It would also give him a chance to participate in high-ranked raids, and the fame he would get as a reawakened hunter would allow him to make extra money. The only problem was that he hadn't mastered his new powers yet, and he wasn't sure he was ready for the fame, so he trashed the idea just as his phone pinged with a message. Sometime later, he makes it to a gate, and just as the screen informs him that he's completed his quest for the day, a group of hunters call out to him. Their leader introduces himself as Hwang Dong-suk, and when Jin Woo introduces himself, the members of the group start mocking him because of his title. Dong-suk tells him to ignore them and says they don't need him to engage in combat since they only need him because they are required to have 8 people to be able to take on the quest. He explains that after the quest, he would be paid a certain amount but would have no share in the spoils. Jin Woo agrees and asks what they need him to do, so Dong-suk points at the bags containing supplies and says he has to carry them. Jin Woo has no problem acting as a pack horse, but asks why they are attempting to enter a gate without a healer. Dong-suk tells him they usually did their raids without them because they were kind of expensive to keep around. Jin Woo then appraises them and concludes that they are the dumbest idiots to walk the planet for refusing to get a healer when all their ranks require a healer to boast them. After Jin Woo signs the contract, another hunter approaches him and introduces himself as Yu Jin-ho, a D-ranked hunter, but one look at him and Jin Woo could tell he is a spoiled rich kid. They then set out for the gate, and after the pass-through they find themselves in a darkened cave, which reminds Jin Woo of the cave that led to the temple. When they make it to the center of the cave, they discover holes in every part of the wall, and Jin Woo quickly deduces that they are dealing with insect-type monsters, so he alerts the others. They pull out their weapons and he lets them know they are about to drop in from the opening above. When the ants come into view, the hunters face them head-on, and as Jin Woo watches them, he is impressed by their skills. However, he feels there's something off about the entire situation, but can't seem to place it. After the battle, the group begin looking for gems and crystals until one of them calls Dong-suk's attention to the way some of the ants looked. He points out they might have been attacked by something larger, and Dong-suk can't help but wonder what it is. From where he stood talking to Jin-ho, Jin Woo watched the squad and told Jin-ho to be on his guard. As they continue making their way inside the dungeon, Jin Woo can't help but think there's something off about the squad. Eventually, they make it to a part of the dungeon with lots of mana crystals, and the squad starts talking about how rich they are going to become. Jin-ho asks Jin Woo for his contract, and after reading it goes to tell Dong-suk that according to the contract, Jin Woo wasn't entitled to spoils of the battle, but it didn't say anything about him not getting part of the mana crystals. Dong-suk immediately tells him that they would all split the crystals, but points to the huge spider sleeping on the roof of the cave. He tells him that once they defeat it, the gate will start closing, so they have to mine the crystals while the creature sleeps. He then asks another member if he brought the mining equipment, and he tells him that he left it in his car. Dong-suk then says they would go back to collect it, but asks Jin-ho and Jin Woo to stay behind. Jin-ho points out that only the two of them can't handle the monster, and Dong-suk assures him that they will be fine since the monster is asleep. As they walk away, Jin Woo can't seem to think that they are up to no good, and to prove his point, the squad double-crosses them and seals them in the cave. The spider soon wakes up, and little Jin-ho tries to play the hero, but Jin Woo drops his bags and tells him to back away. He then summons his dagger and approaches the spider, which growls in his face. Outside the gate, Dong-suk explains to the others that once the spider made Jin-ho and Jin-soo its dinner, it would go back to sleep, allowing them to haul the crystals out safely. He tells them that he saw some openings in the cave's ceiling which they could use to get back in since the entrance was sealed off. He also added that if the spider happened to wake up mid-haul, they would swipe Jin-ho's armor since it was very expensive. Back in the cave, Jin-ho tries to convince Jin Woo that fighting a C-rank boss would be suicide. Jin Woo thinks about this and agrees that the snake and golem he took down before were most likely D ranks, but for some reason, he didn't feel intimidated enough to back down, so he attacked the spider. As he fights the spider, he takes note of its strength, while Jin-ho seems to think Jin Woo is one of those hunters who fake their ranks. The fake rankers were widely known to be psychotic killing machines, which made Jin-ho get scared. Meanwhile, Jin Woo realizes that his stamina is dropping, and if he can't defeat the spider before that happens, he'll start getting slow. He thinks of a plan and decides to use the venom in the dagger to slow it down, but has to find an opening first. Jin-woo notices a spot between its eyes and tries to aim for it, but the spider surprises him by spitting acid at him. He quickly jumps back and uses his dash skill to charge at it again. When he gets close and strikes, his dagger bounces off, so he jumps back before the spider can retaliate. He then decides to keep striking the spot until it gives way, and just as Jin-ho is wondering how long his stamina will last, he gets hit by fatigue and falls to the floor. The spider then moves to strike him, but he uses his full recovery skill and moves out of the way, after which he jumps in the air and stabs it repeatedly in the eye till it falls dead. Jin-ho is amazed by what he just experienced, But as he watches Jinwoo extract the mana gems, he can't help but believe he is a fake ranker. He then approaches Jinwoo with a bottle of water and says he'll harvest the crystals, which makes Jinwoo wonder why he is acting strangely. Just then, the others arrive, and when they drop down into the cave, Dong-suk tells Jin-ho to get rid of Jinwoo as he thinks Jin-ho is the one who got rid of the boss. He tells the young boy that if he refuses to do as they say, he will be an accomplice to their crimes. However, Jin-ho goes to stand next to Jinwoo and tries to protect him, so Dong-suk orders his team to take them out. As they approach, Jinwoo receives an urgent task to kill off the approaching attackers, but since he is distracted, he isn't able to dodge the spell, which sends him flying into a wall. Meanwhile, 3 female hunters meet up for coffee, and the blonde one talks about how Hae-in easily took down an A-rank boss during one of their raids. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo gets back up and approaches the guys who just tried to murder him calmly. One of them gets closer to him and places his arm around him, saying how easy it would be to finish him off because he was weak. Jinwoo doesn't respond but uses his dagger to slice his head off. The others are surprised and immediately move to attack him, but Jinwoo takes them out without breaking a sweat, leaving only Dong-suk. Seeing that Jinwoo is an unhinged psycho, Dong-suk powers up and charges at him, but Jinwoo grabs hold of his face and smashes him to the ground. He immediately starts begging like the cowardly dog that is, but his pleas fall on deaf ears as Jinwoo slices his head off. Jin-ho starts puking his guts out just as the dungeon starts collapsing because the boss has been defeated. Outside, they tell the Hunters Association agent that all the other members of their crew died during the raid, and she seems to believe it. However, she thinks they made it out alive because Jin-ho managed to fight as he had high-quality gear. Jin-chul is informed about the dungeon raid in which Jin-woo and Jin-ho are the only survivors, and he asks why it is considered a major issue. The agent then tells him that one of the hunters who died in the dungeon was Hwang Dong-suk, the brother of the infamous Hwang Dong-soo. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Jin-ah are eating lunch at home, and she asks how he managed to return from a dungeon raid without any injuries. This makes him remember how he didn't hesitate to cut down the guys when the system told him to. Jin-ah notices he is spacing out and asks if everything is okay, but he gives her a lame excuse. When she goes back to eating, he drinks his beer, and almost immediately a screen appears telling him that he is being detoxified because he ingested poison. He then takes the rest of the drink to his room, but discovers that no matter how much he drinks, he can't get drunk. This surprises him, so he checks his skills to see if there is something there, and discovers that he has health and longevity skills. He realizes that he received it as a reward for clearing the temple, which is why all his limbs grew back. Later that day, his sister comes to inform him that he has a call from Jin-ho, and when she sees how much he's been drinking, she scolds him for it, but he assures her that all is fine. Sometime later, he meets up with Jin-ho in a cafe, and Jin-ho asks him to join a strike team he is putting together. Jin-woo refuses, but Jin-ho begs him to listen to his proposal. He then explains that he wants to become a guild master, and to achieve that he has to have at least 20 dungeon raid experience. Jin-woo asks why he wants to own a guild when his father owns a construction company, so Jin-ho tells him that the guild will belong to his father. However, his father intends to make his brother the guild master, but unfortunately, his brother hasn't awakened yet. He says his father is considering getting an S-rank hunter to fill the position, but the only one not associated with a guild is retired. Jin-woo then asks if his father intends to poach an S-rank from one of the guilds, and Jin-ho shamefully admits to it. He then offers Jin-woo a contract stating that he will receive 30 billion won if he joins him, but he considers the fact that he has yet to understand how his powers work, so he refuses him. Elsewhere, Dong-suk's brother receives Jin-woo and Jin-ho's personal information from his assistant. He tells her that his brother was murdered, and because of that he will return home to take revenge. She advises him not to make the trip because it would disrupt his guild's business, so he tells her to add it to his schedule, after which he prays Jin-ho and Jin-woo live long enough for him to crush them. The next day, Jin-woo goes jogging with his sister, and as they run, he asks what she would do if they had 30 billion won. Jin-ah tells him that she would use some of the money to settle their mother's medical expenses, then use some for her tuition, and save the rest. However, she tells him that since it's all speculation, she can't be sure that's all she would do with the money. Jin-woo agrees with her, and then speeds up as he tells her to try and keep up with his speed. Eventually, he stops running and checks his daily quests to collect his reward, but he notices that the quest keeps counting, so he decides to redo them just so he can see what would happen. By the time he is done, he checks his rewards and receives another random loot box, which contains another key. The screen appears again and lets him know that the key unlocks a demon castle with an acquisition difficulty of an S rank. He also learns that in the demon castle, he can obtain the ingredients for the elixir of life, which can cure all diseases. Later that night, he goes to the building where the key would open the gate to the dungeon, and the moment he steps through it, he finds himself on the flaming side of Punk Hazard. As he heads to the castle, he tells himself that if it gets too hard, he will use the teleportation stone. When he gets to the castle doors, he comes face to face with a flaming Cerberus, but he doesn't bat an eye as he brings out his dagger and charges at the beast. Jinwoo manages to show off his butchering skills by slicing and cutting different parts of the Cerberus's body.
Oh my God!
But it hardly has any effect. He then tried to intimidate it by using his murderous intent, but that doesn't work either. Deciding to try something else, Jinwoo jumps on top of one of the heads and stabs it, hoping to slow it down with the dagger's venom, but the beast shakes him off. Jinwoo falls off, but the beast goes after him, and before he can move out of the way, it bites off his left arm. Immediately, Jinwoo receives a warning that his health is dropping, so he moves out of the way before the beast can step on him. He then receives another message warning him that all the Cerberus's abilities have doubled, and before he can react, it slams him into a wall. Jinwoo uses his instant recovery skill to heal himself before charging at the beast and stabbing one of the heads in the eye. The beast shakes him off before proceeding to toss him around like a ping-pong ball. And by the time Jinwoo was able to catch his breath, he had already lost a lot of blood. The beast charges at him again, but Jinwoo plays dirty and kicks a huge rock in its face, which allows him to escape. As he hides behind a wall, he concludes that he is no match for the beast and decides to use the teleportation stone to leave the dungeon. However, the Cerberus finds him before he can activate it, and Jinwoo accidentally drops the stone before escaping to another location. As he hides, he receives another health warning, so he buys some healing potion, but that doesn't seem to be enough. He checks his inventory once more and sees the poison he had received after defeating the anaconda. He then remembers how his body had mistaken alcohol for poison and detoxified his body, so he decides to drink the poison, which seems to work. The Cerberus soon finds him and attacks again, but this time around, the effects of its skill have worn off, so Jinwoo uses the opportunity to attack it. He slashes one of the heads but ends up in the mouth of another, and since he refuses to give up, he repeatedly stabs it in the eye until it bursts. The blood loss was so much it sprayed into the air and became rain, which put out the fire. As it falls to the floor dead, Jinwoo receives a notice that he has leveled up, and almost immediately all his wounds heal. He then checks his rewards and sees that he has received another key, which he believes will unlock the castle doors. He also receives a parchment which has the ingredients he needs for the elixir of life, but he has to go into the castle to find them. However, he knows that going into the castle now would mean instant death, so he decides to leave it for another day. Thanks for watching, fellow weebs. If you enjoyed this recap, dive into the next video or playlist. See you in the next recap.